The warship was cold, not just in temperature, but in feeling. Lieutenant Una Park stood at the observation window and watched the stars pass by like tiny fireflies frozen in black glass. She had been on this ship for 3 weeks now, and she still felt like a stranger. The vessel was called the Iron Claw. It belonged to the Volcari, a species that looked like large cats walking on 2 legs. They had fur in colors of gray, brown, gold, and black. Their eyes glowed in low light. Their claws could cut through metal, and their military was one of the most respected in the entire Galactic Coalition. Una was the first human to serve on a Volcari warship. She was not a soldier. She was a cultural liaison, which meant her job was to help the 2 species understand each other. It was an important job, but most of the Volcari crew did not think so. To them, she was small, soft, weak, a curiosity at best. She did not blame them. Humans had only joined the galactic community 20 years ago. They were new, unproven. The Volcari had been warriors for thousands of years. Why would they respect a species that could not even see in the dark? Una turned away from the window and walked down the corridor. Her boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. Volcari crew members passed her without a word. Some nodded. Most did not. She had learned to accept this. Respect had to be earned, and she had not earned it yet. The ship was on a simple mission. They were transporting supplies to a colony world near the border. But there was something else on board. Something that made this trip different. 12 Volcari cubs. They were orphans. Their parents had died in a border attack 6 months ago. A small outpost had been destroyed by raiders, and these children were the only survivors. They had no family left, no home. The Iron Claw was taking them to a sanctuary world where they would be cared for. Una had seen the cubs only once, on her first day aboard. They had been sitting in a corner of the recreation bay, huddled together like a pile of sad, furry blankets. Their eyes were empty. Their ears were flat against their heads. They did not play. They did not speak. They just sat and stared at nothing. It had broken her heart. She had asked the ship's medical officer about them. His name was Dorian, and he was an older Volcari with gray fur and tired eyes. He had told her that the cubs were healthy in body, but not in spirit. They had seen terrible things. They had lost everything, and no one on the ship knew how to help them. The Volcari were warriors. They knew how to fight. They knew how to survive, but they did not know how to heal a broken heart. That was not something they taught in military training. Una thought about the cubs often. She thought about their empty eyes and their silence. She remembered being a child herself, back on Earth, in a small town in Korea. She remembered playing in cardboard boxes, pretending they were spaceships, castles, and secret hideouts. She remembered how a simple box could become anything if you used your imagination. One night, she could not sleep. She lay in her small cabin and stared at the ceiling. The cubs kept appearing in her mind. Their sad faces. Their still bodies. She made a decision. The next morning, she went to see Lieutenant Commander Woojin Kang. He was the only other human on the ship. He worked in engineering and had been in the Coalition fleet for 5 years. He was tall, quiet, and had a kind face. More importantly, he knew how to get things done. She found him in the engine room, checking power levels on a console. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Una, what brings you down here?" She told him about the cubs. She told him about her idea. She asked if he could help her get a supply request approved. Woojin listened carefully. When she finished, he tilted his head. "You want to order a cardboard box?" "Yes, just a box." "An empty cardboard box?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed. It was a good laugh, warm and genuine. "I do not understand humans," he said. "And I am one." but he helped her anyway. He filed the request. He marked it as cultural research materials. He did not explain what it was for. 3 days later, when the ship stopped at a supply station, a single cardboard box arrived in the cargo bay. It was brown. It was plain. It was big enough for a small child to sit inside. To the Valkyrie crew who saw it, it was the most useless thing they had ever seen. The cargo officer, a large Valkyrie named Commander Toven, stared at it for a long time. His golden eyes moved from the box to Yuna and back again. "This is your request?" he asked. "Yes, Commander. It is empty." "That is correct." "What is its purpose?" Yuna smiled. "I will show you." She carried the box herself. It was light and awkward, bumping against her legs as she walked. Crew members stopped and watched her pass. She heard whispers behind her. She did not care. She reached the recreation bay and stepped inside. The room was large and mostly empty. Training equipment stood in one corner. Tables and chairs filled another. And in the far corner, the 12 cubs sat in their usual pile, staring at nothing. Yuna walked to the center of the room. She set the box down on the floor. Then she stepped back and sat on a nearby chair. She waited. At first, nothing happened. The cubs did not move. They watched her with suspicious eyes. They watched the box with confusion. One of them, a small female with gray fur, lifted her head slightly. Her nose twitched. Minutes passed. Yuna remained still. She had learned patience on Earth, watching birds in the garden, waiting for them to trust her enough to come close. Finally, the gray cub moved. She crawled forward slowly, her belly low to the ground like a predator stalking prey. The other cubs watched but did not follow. The gray cub reached the box. She sniffed it. She touched it with one small paw. The box moved slightly, and she jumped back with a tiny hiss. But curiosity was stronger than fear. She crept forward again. This time, she pushed her head inside. For a moment, she was still. Then she climbed in completely and disappeared. Yuna heard a small sound from inside the box. It took her a moment to recognize it. It was a purr. The other cubs watched with wide eyes. One by one, they began to move. They crawled toward the box like moths toward a flame. They pushed and sniffed and climbed. Soon, 5 cubs were trying to fit inside. A box meant for one. And then something wonderful happened. They started to play. They pushed each other. They tumbled. They made small growling sounds that were not angry but joyful. One cub grabbed the edge of the box and pulled it over, trapping 3 others inside. They squealed and burst out, then dove back in again. Yuna watched with tears in her eyes. These were not empty shells anymore. These were children, playing, living. Commander Toven appeared at the door. He stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, watching the chaos in front of him. "What is happening?" he asked. Yuna wiped her eyes and smiled. "They are playing, Commander. They are finally playing." He was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "How?" "It is just a box." Yuna looked at the cubs wrestling over their precious treasure. She thought about how to explain. How could she tell a warrior about the magic of imagination? About how an empty box could become a universe? "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the simplest things hold the most power." Toven watched for another moment. Then he shook his head and walked away, muttering something about humans being impossible to understand. Yuna did not mind. She understood. And that was enough. In the corner, the cubs played on. Word spread through the Iron Claw like fire through dry grass. The human had done something strange. The human had brought an empty box onto the ship. The human had made the orphan cubs play. By the next morning, almost every crew member had heard the story. Some believed it. Some did not. Many wanted to see for themselves. Yuna arrived at the recreation bay early that day. She wanted to check on the cubs before her shift started. When she entered, she found she was not alone. 7 Valkyrie officers stood near the door, watching. They spoke in low voices. Their ears turned toward the center of the room, where the cardboard box sat like a strange artifact from another world. The cubs were already there. They had pushed the box into a corner and built a wall of cushions around it. 3 cubs sat inside the box, peering out through a hole they had torn in the side. 2 more crouched behind the cushion wall. The rest crawled on their bellies across the floor, moving toward the fortress like tiny soldiers. One of the watching officers was Commander Toven. He stood with his arms crossed, his tail swishing slowly behind him. "They've been doing this for 2 hours," he said to Yuna. "They wake up. They come here. They play with the box. It makes no sense." Yuna stood beside him and watched. A smile grew on her face as one of the crawling cubs leaped over the cushion wall and tackled the defenders inside the box. The box fell over with a thump. Cubs spilled out in every direction, growling and squealing. "It makes perfect sense," Yuna said. "They are being children." Toven looked at her with confusion in his golden eyes. "But the box does nothing. It has no function. It does not make sounds or lights. It does not teach or train. It is just cardboard. That is exactly why it works." Before Toven could respond, another officer stepped forward. He was younger, with brown fur and curious eyes. His name was Ensign Miro, and he worked in navigation. "Lieutenant Park," he said, using her formal title. "May I ask a question?" "Of course. On your world, do all children play with empty boxes?" Yuna thought about it. She remembered her childhood home. The deliveries that came in big brown boxes. How she and her brother would fight over who got to keep the box after the contents were removed. How they would spend hours turning nothing into everything. "Many do," she said. "Boxes are perfect for imagining. A box can be a house, a ship, a car, a cave, a castle. It can be anything you want it to be. The box itself is not important. What matters is what the child sees in their mind." Miro tilted his head. "The child decides what it is?" "Yes. And the box becomes that thing?" "In a way, yes. In their imagination, it becomes real." Miro was silent for a moment. Then he looked at the cubs, who were now using the box as a drum, hitting it with their paws and making loud thumping sounds. "Humans are very strange," he said finally. "Thank you," Yuna replied. Later that day, Lieutenant Commander Wujin Kang found Yuna in the mess hall. He sat across from her with a tray of food that looked vaguely like fish, but was probably not. "I heard about the box," he said. "Everyone has heard about the box." Yuna sipped her tea. "It worked. Clearly. The cubs have not stopped playing all day." The medical officer is amazed. He said their heart rates are higher, their appetites have improved, and they are actually sleeping at night now. They needed something to care about, something that was theirs. Wujin nodded slowly. "You know, when I first joined the fleet, I thought the hardest part would be the fighting, the danger, the distance from home." He paused. "But it was not. The hardest part was being misunderstood, being seen as weak because I was human, because I was soft. And now? Now I know that soft is not the same as weak. Sometimes the soft things are the strongest of all." Yuna smiled. She liked Wujin. He understood things that many others did not. That evening, she returned to the recreation bay. The cubs were still there, but they had changed their game. The box was now on its side, the opening facing the door like the mouth of a cave. 7 cubs were hidden inside, pressed together in the darkness. The other 5 were scattered around the room, pretending to search for them. Yuna sat in her usual chair and watched. She noticed something new. The smallest cub, the gray female who had been the first to explore the box, was giving orders. Her tiny voice squeaked commands to the others. She pointed with her paw. She directed the hiding and the seeking. She was becoming a leader. Yuna felt warmth spread through her chest. This was more than play. This was healing. This was growth. These cubs were learning to trust again, to connect again, to live again. And all it had taken was a simple cardboard box. The door opened behind her. She turned and saw a figure she did not expect. Fleet Commander Dorvax. He was the highest-ranking Velkari on the ship. He was old, with dark gray fur marked by silver stripes that showed his age. His left ear was torn, a wound from some ancient battle. His eyes were sharp and cold, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and felt too little. He walked into the room and stopped. His gaze moved slowly across the scene. The cubs freezing in their play, the box lying on its side, the cushioned walls and scattered toys. What is this? His voice was deep, like stones grinding together. Yuna stood. The cubs are playing, Commander. I can see that. He stepped closer to the box and looked at it the way someone might look at a dead insect. This is what they play with? This piece of garbage? It is not garbage, Commander. It is a toy. It is cardboard. Yes. Dorvax turned his cold eyes to her. I was told that you requested this item, that you used coalition resources to obtain an empty box for children to play with. Yuna kept her voice calm. That is correct. Why? She had expected this question. She had prepared for it. But now, standing before this massive warrior with his scars and his power, the words felt small. Because they needed it, she said simply. They were hurting. They had lost everything. And they needed something to help them heal. Something to remind them that they are still children. That they are still allowed to play. Dorvax was silent. His tail stopped moving. His ears turned toward the cubs, who had started playing again, too young to stay still for long. Play does not heal wounds, he said finally. Only time heals wounds. And even then, scars remain. With respect, Commander, I disagree. Play is how children learn to be strong. It is how they practice for life. It is how they find joy again after sorrow. His eyes narrowed. You speak as if you know these cubs. You have been on this ship for less than 1 month. I do not need to know them personally. I know what it means to be a child. I know what it means to lose something important. And I know that sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest difference. For a long moment, Dorvax stared at her. Then he looked at the cubs. One of them had climbed on top of the box and was declaring herself queen of the mountain. Another was trying to pull her down. A third was chewing on a corner of the cardboard. Something shifted in the old commander's face. It was small, barely visible, but Yuna saw it. A crack in the ice dot, then it was gone. Dorvax straightened and turned away. Continue your experiment, Lieutenant, he said over his shoulder, but do not let it interfere with the mission. He walked out of the room without another word. Yuna let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That had been close. She did not know what would have happened if Dorvax had ordered her to stop, but he had not. And for now, that was enough. She looked back at the cubs. The gray female had claimed the box again and was sitting inside like a tiny empress on her throne. Her eyes met Yuna's across the room, and for just a moment, Yuna could have sworn the little one smiled. The box was battered now. Its corners were crushed. Its sides were covered with claw marks and bite holes. But it was still standing, still serving its purpose, still making magic happen. Yuna sat back in her chair and watched the cubs play. Tomorrow she would think about Dorvax and what he might do. Tomorrow she would worry about the mission and her place on this ship. But tonight, She would simply enjoy the sound of children laughing. It was the most beautiful sound in any galaxy. And it all started with a box. Days passed, and the cardboard box became the most famous object on the Iron Claw. Crew members who had never visited the recreation bay now found reasons to walk past it. They would pause at the door, look inside, and watch the cubs play with expressions of wonder and confusion. Una spent every free moment with the children. She learned their names. She learned their personalities. She learned how each one played differently. The gray female was named Rivi. She was the smallest, but also the bravest. She had been the first to enter the box, and now she was the leader of the group. She made the plans. She gave the orders. The other cubs followed her without question. There was Coda, a large brown male who was gentle and careful. He liked to guard the box and protect it from imaginary enemies. He would sit beside it for hours, watching the room with serious eyes. There was Myra, a golden female who loved to climb. She would stand on top of the box and announce herself as the ruler of all she could see. Then she would fall off and do it again. There were the twins, Zin and Zon, who could not be separated. They did everything together. They slept together, ate together, and played together. If one went into the box, the other followed within seconds. And there were 7 more, each one special, each one healing in their own way. Una taught them games from Earth. She showed them hide and seek, where one cub would close their eyes and count while the others hid. She taught them tag, where one cub would chase the others and try to touch them. She showed them how to make shadow puppets on the wall using the ship's lights. But the game they loved most was Ambush. It started by accident. Una was sitting in her chair, reading a report on her tablet, when the cubs decided to surprise her. They crept up behind her chair, using the box as cover. Then, on Rivi's signal, they all jumped out and tackled her legs. Una screamed and dropped her tablet. The cubs roared with tiny voices and piled on top of her. For a moment, she was buried under fur and claws and squealing children. Then she started laughing. She laughed until tears ran down her face. The cubs stepped back, worried they had hurt her. But when they saw her smile, they understood. They had won. They had surprised the human. After that, Ambush became their favorite game. They would hide behind the box, under tables, inside storage containers. They would wait in silence, their little hearts beating fast, their eyes wide with excitement. Then they would attack whoever walked into the room. Woojin was caught 3 times in 1 week. The first time, he was carrying a cup of coffee. It went everywhere. The second time, he was talking on his communicator. His screech of surprise was heard throughout the engineering deck. The third time, he saw them hiding and pretended not to notice. He let them tackle him anyway. "You are too soft," Commander Tovin told him. "You let them catch you." "They are children," Woojin replied with a shrug. "Let them have their victories." Ensign Jizu Beak was the next target. She was young, only 23, with bright eyes and a quick smile. She worked in communications and had always been curious about the orphan cubs. When she heard about the ambush game, she asked Una if she could visit. She was caught before she even made it through the door. The cubs had positioned the box right beside the entrance. They had covered it with a blanket to make it look like ordinary cargo. When Jisu stepped inside, 12 small bodies exploded from every direction and brought her to the ground. She shrieked. She laughed. She pretended to surrender. The cubs celebrated their victory with growls and purrs. From that day on, Jisu became a regular visitor. She would come every evening after her shift and play with the cubs for hours. She taught them card games. She told them stories. She let them braid her long black hair into strange and wonderful shapes. "They are getting better," she told Una one night. "At the ambushes, I mean. Their timing is improving. Their coordination, too. Yuna nodded. She had noticed the same thing. The cubs were natural predators. Their instincts, dulled by grief and trauma, were starting to wake up again. They were learning to work together, to plan, to execute. It was play, but it was also training. In their own way, they were becoming Velkari. The medical officer, Dorian, visited to check on the cubs' health. What he found amazed him. Their stress levels had dropped significantly. Their sleep patterns had normalized. They were eating well and gaining healthy weight. Most importantly, they were talking again. Before the box, the cubs had been almost silent. They communicated in gestures and looks. Now, they chattered constantly. They argued about tactics. They debated who got to hide in the box. They told each other stories about the great ambush they had achieved. "I do not understand it," Dorian admitted to Yuna. "In my training, I learned many ways to treat trauma. Medicine, therapy, time. But I never learned about cardboard boxes." Yuna smiled. Sometimes the best medicine is not medicine at all. One evening, something changed. Yuna was sitting with the cubs, helping them plan their next ambush. They had already caught most of the junior officers on the ship. They were running out of targets. Rivi crawled into Yuna's lap and looked up at her with golden eyes. "We want a big one," the little cub said. "A big what?" "A big target. Someone important. Someone scary." The other cubs nodded eagerly. They wanted a challenge. They wanted to prove themselves. Yuna thought about it. There were many officers on the ship. Most of them would be good sports about being ambushed. But there was one who would not. Fleet Commander Dorvax. The name came to her mind unbidden, and she pushed it away. No, that was too dangerous. Dorvax was the highest-ranking officer on the ship. He was cold and serious. He had no sense of humor that anyone had ever seen. Ambushing him would be disrespectful at best, disastrous at worst. But then she looked at the cubs. She saw their bright eyes, their eager faces, their growing confidence. They had come so far in just a few weeks. They had transformed from broken, silent shells into vibrant, playful children, and she remembered something Dorvax had said. Something about play, not healing wounds. Something dismissive and cold. Maybe, she thought, it was time to teach the commander a lesson. "All right," she said slowly. "I might have an idea, but it will take time and planning, and you must all work together perfectly. Can you do that?" The cubs nodded so fast their ears flapped. Yuna glanced toward the door. She thought about what she was about to help them do. It was risky. It could damage her career. It could get her sent back to Earth in disgrace. But when she looked at Rivi's face, so full of hope and excitement, she knew she did not care. "Let me tell you about our target," she began. The cubs gathered around her. Their eyes grew wide as she described Fleet Commander Dorvax. His size, his strength, his reputation, his patrol schedule. For the first time since Yuna had met them, the cubs looked scared. But they also looked determined that this would be their greatest challenge. Their ultimate test. And if they succeeded, it would be legendary. Yuna pulled the cardboard box into the center of their circle. It was battered and worn now, covered with marks from countless games. But it was still standing, still serving its purpose. "This is your command center," she told them. "From here, you will plan the greatest ambush in the history of this ship." The cubs looked at the box. Then they looked at each other. Then they began to plan. And somewhere in the corridors of the Iron Claw, Fleet Commander Dorvax walked his evening patrol, completely unaware of the storm that was coming for him. The planning took 7 days. Every evening, the cubs gathered around the cardboard box and worked on their strategy. They drew maps on scraps of paper. They practiced their positions. They timed their movements down to the second. Yuna watched with growing amazement. These were not just children playing a game anymore. These were young Volcari learning the skills of their ancestors. Stealth, coordination, patience. Same skills that had made their species feared throughout the galaxy. And they were using those skills to ambush their commanding officer. Rivi was the mastermind. She sat inside the box like a general in a war room, directing the others with tiny paws and sharp commands. She had studied Dorvax's movements carefully. She knew when he woke up, when he ate, when he walked the corridors on his evening patrol. He walks the command corridor at 0600 every morning, she announced to the group. Always the same time. Always the same path. He checks the systems. He looks at the reports. He speaks to no one. Why does he do that? Ask Oda, the big brown male. Because he is the commander, Rivi replied. Commanders must know everything. He seems sad, said Myra, the golden climber. His ears are always flat. His tail never moves. He walks like he is carrying something heavy. The cubs were quiet for a moment. Even at their young age, they understood sadness. They had felt it themselves. Maybe that is why we must ambush him, said Zin, one of the twins. Yes, agreed Zan, his sister. Maybe he needs to remember how to play. Yuna smiled at their words. Children often understood things that adults forgot. The plan was complex. The cardboard box would be positioned in the command corridor, near a corner where Dorvax would not see it until he was very close. It would be covered with a gray blanket to make it look like ordinary cargo. But the box was just a distraction. The real attack would come from everywhere else. Some cubs would hide in the ceiling vents. Others would wait behind supply crates. Two would crouch inside open storage lockers. One brave soul would hide in a cleaning cart. When Dorvax passed the box, Rivi would give the signal. Then all 12 cubs would attack at once, from every direction. It was ambitious. It was dangerous. It was exactly what the cubs needed, but they could not do it alone. Woojin helped by providing information about the corridor's layout. He showed them where the vents connected, which storage lockers could be opened from the inside, and which supply crates were empty. I am not helping you ambush the commander, he said with a completely straight face. I am simply answering questions about ship infrastructure. Jisoo went even further. She worked in communications, which meant she had access to crew schedules and patrol reports. She casually mentioned to the cubs exactly when Dorvax would begin his morning walk, confirmed by official records. This is treason, you know, Yuna told her one evening. Jisoo grinned. It is not treason. It is morale building. The crew is more united than ever. Everyone is talking about the cubs and their ambush. Even the senior officers are placing bets. Bets on what? On whether they will succeed. The odds are currently 3-1 against. Yuna shook her head. This had grown beyond anything she had imagined. What had started as a simple way to help grieving children had become a shipwide event. Commander Tovin approached her the day before the planned ambush. He did not look angry, which surprised her. I know what the cubs are planning, he said quietly. Yuna's heart dropped. Commander, I can explain. He held up a paw. I am not here to stop you. I am here to tell you that the security cameras in the command corridor will experience a brief malfunction tomorrow morning at 600. Approximately 5 minutes of lost footage. Yuna stared at him. Sir? Tovin's whiskers twitched. It might have been a smile. Fleet Commander Dorvax once told me that play does not heal wounds. I disagreed but said nothing. Perhaps it is time someone showed him otherwise. He turned and walked away, leaving Yuna speechless. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in her bunk and thought about what would happen in the morning. Dorvax was not known for his sense of humor. He had scars that spoke of terrible battles. He had eyes that saw everything and forgave nothing. What would he do when 12 small cubs exploded from every direction and tackled him to the floor? She honestly did not know. At 053, Yuna woke and dressed quickly. She made her way to the recreation bay, where the cubs were already waiting. They were vibrating with excitement. Their tails swished. Their ears pointed forward. Their small claws extended and retracted nervously. "Are you ready?" she asked them. 12 heads nodded. "Remember the plan. Wait for Rivi's signal. Do not attack until everyone is in position. And most importantly, have fun," they said together. Yuna smiled. "That is right. This is still a game. No matter what happens, remember that." They gathered the cardboard box and the gray blanket. They collected the supplies they would need. Then, moving in perfect silence, they made their way to the command corridor. The corridor was empty at this hour. Most crew members were either sleeping or starting their morning routines elsewhere. The cubs moved like shadows, each one finding their hiding spot with practiced ease. Rivi and 3 others climbed into the box. They pulled the blanket over it and went still. From the outside, it looked like a simple piece of cargo waiting to be moved. 4 more cubs slipped into the ceiling vents. Yuna heard the soft patter of their feet overhead. Then silence. 2 cubs crawled into storage lockers and closed the doors behind them. The twins hid behind a large supply crate. Pressed together like one creature, the smallest cub, a black male named Pip, climbed into the cleaning cart and covered himself with rags. Everyone was in position. Yuna stepped back and looked at the corridor. It appeared completely normal. There was no sign that 12 small predators were hiding in every corner, waiting for their prey. She retreated to a side passage where she could watch without being seen. Jisoo was already there, holding her tablet. "The commander left his quarters 2 minutes ago," Jisoo whispered. "He will be here soon." Yuna's heart pounded. This was really happening. They waited. The minutes stretched like hours. Yuna counted her breaths. She tried to stay calm. Then she heard footsteps. Heavy, steady, getting closer. Fleet. Commander Dorvax walked around the corner and into the corridor. He moved with the slow grace of a predator who feared nothing. His eyes swept left and right, checking everything, missing nothing. He passed the storage lockers where 2 cubs hid. He walked by the supply crate that concealed the twins. He moved closer to the cardboard box that sat so innocently against the wall. He paused. His ears rotated. His nose twitched. Something was wrong. He sensed it. The old warrior's instincts were screaming at him. This corridor was too quiet. The shadows were too deep. Something was hiding here, waiting for him. His eyes locked on the gray blanket. The shape beneath it. The box. His claws extended. And then Rivi gave the signal. It was a tiny sound, barely more than a chirp. But it was enough. The corridor exploded with movement. Cubs burst from the ceiling vents like furry meteors. They dropped onto Dorvax's shoulders, his back, his arms. Cubs erupted from the storage lockers and wrapped around his legs. The twins launched from behind the supply crate and tackled his knees. Pip jumped from the cleaning cart and clung to his tail. And from the cardboard box, Rivi led her team in a direct assault on his chest. 12 small bodies. 24 grabbing paws. 48 tiny claws. Fleet Commander Dorvax. Decorated war hero, veteran of 100 battles. Terror of the enemy fleet. Went down like a falling tree. He hit the floor with a crash that echoed through the corridor. Cubs swarmed over him. They growled their tiny war cries. They pulled at his uniform. One grabbed his ceremonial sash and ran away with it. Another climbed onto his face and peered into his eyes. Yuna watched from her hiding spot, her hand pressed over her mouth. Jisoo had stopped breathing entirely. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Fleet Commander Dorvax did something no one on the Ironclaw had ever seen him do. He laughed. It started as a rumble deep in his chest. Then it grew, rising and rolling like thunder. His whole body shook with it. The cubs bounced on top of him, confused but delighted. "You got me," he said, his voice thick with something that might have been tears. "You small demons actually got me." Rivi stood on his chest and raised her tiny paws in triumph. "We are the greatest hunters," she declared. "We defeated the commander." Dorvax looked at her with something new in his eyes. Something warm. "Yes," he said softly. "You did." And he kept laughing. The sound of Fleet Commander Dorvax laughing traveled through the Ironclaw faster than any message in the communication system. Crew members stopped what they were doing. Officers looked up from their consoles. In the engine room, Wujin dropped his tools in shock. The commander was laughing. The commander who never smiled. The commander who walked through life like a ghost made of iron and regret. He was laughing. By the time Yuna reached the corridor, Dorvax was still on the floor. Cubs covered him like a living blanket. Some were chewing on his uniform buttons. Others were playing with his silver-streaked ears. Rivi had claimed a spot on his chest and was purring so loudly that Yuna could hear it from 10 feet away. Dorvax made no move to get up. He lay there, his massive chest rising and falling, and let the children climb all over him. "I surrender," he announced. "I am defeated, captured, at the mercy of my enemies." The cubs cheered with high, squeaking voices. Jisoo stepped out of her hiding spot, her tablet hanging forgotten at her side. "Sir, are you all right?" Dorvax turned his head to look at her. There was something different about his face. The coldness was gone. The hardness had melted away. He looked like someone waking up from a very long, very dark dream. "I am alive, Ensign," he said. Perhaps for the first time in many years. More crew members arrived, drawn by the noise and the impossible rumors. They found their commanding officer sprawled on the floor, decorated with cub hair and missing his ceremonial sash, and he did not seem to care at all. Eventually, Dorvax sat up. Cubs slid off him in every direction, tumbling and rolling on the floor. He gathered Rivi in his large paws and held her up so they were face to face. "You planned this," he said. It was not a question. Rivi nodded proudly. "I am the leader. I made the strategy. A good strategy. Excellent use of terrain. Perfect timing. You attacked from every angle and gave me nowhere to run." His voice held genuine respect. "You would make a fine officer someday." Rivi's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Really." The little gray cub purred even louder. Dorvax set her down gently and finally stood. His uniform was a mess. His fur was sticking up in strange directions. He had never looked more undignified in his entire military career. He had also never looked more alive. His eyes found Yuna in the crowd. She straightened, ready to defend herself, ready to explain why she had helped the cubs ambush the highest-ranking officer on the ship. But Dorvax did not look angry. He walked toward her slowly, the crowd parting around him like water around a stone. "Lieutenant Park," he said. "Sir, walk with me." It was not a request. They walked together through the corridors of the Ironclaw. The cubs tried to follow, but Tovin gently herded them back toward the recreation bay with promises of food and stories. Soon, Yuna and Dorvax were alone. They reached the observation deck. Through the wide windows, stars scattered across the blackness like spilled diamonds. Dorvax stood with his back to her, looking out at the universe. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly. Yuna stayed silent. She was small, full of energy, full of mischief. She would hide in supply closets and jump out at me when I came home from missions. Every time, She surprised me. Every time, I pretended to be scared. He paused. She loved boxes. Cardboard boxes. She would sit in them for hours, telling me she was flying to distant worlds. What happened to her? The same thing that happened to those cubs' parents. A border attack. A raid. One moment she was alive, laughing, playing. The next moment she was gone. Just gone. Yuna felt tears building behind her eyes. I am so sorry, Commander. Dorvax turned to face her. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. When those cubs first came aboard, I could not look at them. Every time I saw their faces, I saw her. Every time I heard their silence, I heard the silence of my own home after she died. I thought if I stayed away, if I pretended they did not exist, the pain would be less. But it was not less. No, it was worse. Because I was not just ignoring them. I was ignoring her memory. Everything she taught me about joy and play and love. I buried it all so deep that I forgot it existed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. It was a torn piece of cardboard, ripped from the corner of the box during the ambush. This is nothing, he said, looking at it. A piece of garbage. Worthless material that any reasonable person would throw away. He closed his paw around it, but it brought those children back to life. It made them laugh and play and hope again. And today, it made me remember what I had forgotten. He looked at Yuna with new eyes. Eyes that saw her clearly for the first time. Tell me about the box, Lieutenant. I want to understand. Yuna took a deep breath. She thought about her childhood, her home, the simple joys that had shaped her into who she was today. Humans believe that children do not need much to be happy, she began. They do not need expensive toys or advanced technology or perfect conditions. They need safety. They need attention. And they need something to spark their imagination. And the box provides this? The box provides permission. Permission to pretend. Permission to create. Permission to be children. It is not magic, Commander. It is trust. You give a child an empty box, and you are telling them that their imagination is valuable, that their play matters, that they are allowed to be young. Dorvax was quiet for a long time. Stars drifted past the window. Somewhere in the ship, 12 cubs were probably planning their next ambush. I have been a warrior for 40 years, he said finally. I have won battles. I have lost friends. I have carried burdens that no one should have to carry. And in all that time, no one has ever taught me anything as important as what you just said. He straightened and looked at her with fierce determination. I want you to request additional boxes for the recreation bay. Yuna blinked. Sir, boxes. More of them. Different sizes. I want those cubs to have as many as they need. I want them to build fortresses and spaceships and whatever else their small minds can imagine. That is an unusual order, Commander. It is an official order. Log it. Report it. I do not care what anyone thinks. A smile spread across Yuna's face. Yes, sir. And Lieutenant? Sir, thank you for reminding an old soldier that there is more to life than war. He walked past her toward the door. Then he paused and looked back. When I was lying on that floor, covered in cubs, I felt something I had not felt in 15 years. Do you know what it was? Yuna shook her head. Joy. He said the word like he was testing it, seeing if it still fit in his mouth. Pure, simple joy. The kind my daughter used to give me every day. He left without another word. Yuna stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The cold reception. The loneliness. The feeling of being small and weak in a world of giants. And then a cardboard box had changed everything. Later that day, she returned to the recreation bay. The cubs were there, gathered around their beloved box. It was barely holding together now, held in shape by tape and stubbornness. But the cubs did not care. They loved it anyway. Rivi saw Yuna and ran over to her. The little gray cub bounced around her legs with excitement. "We won!" she declared. "We defeated the commander. Everyone is talking about it." Yuna knelt down and stroked the cub's soft fur. "You did amazing. All of you. Will we get in trouble?" "No. In fact, the commander has ordered more boxes for you. You will have a whole fleet of them soon." Rivi's eyes went wide. "Really? Our own fleet?" "Your own fleet." The cub's purr could probably be heard in the engine room. That evening, the entire crew gathered in the mess hall. It was not officially a celebration, but everyone knew what they were celebrating. The cubs had done something no one thought possible. They had made Fleet Commander Dorvax laugh. Wujin sat beside Yuna, eating something that might have been vegetables. Jisoo was at the next table, telling the story of the ambush for the 10th time to an eager audience. "You know what this means, right?" Wujin said. "What?" "You have proven something important. Not just about boxes or cubs or play. You have proven that humans have value in this fleet. That we bring something different. Something needed." Yuna looked around the room. Valkyrie officers were laughing and talking. Cubs were playing tag between the tables. Commander Tovin was trying to teach card games to a group of interested crew members. It did not look like a warship anymore. It looked like a home. "Maybe that is what we do," she said softly. "Maybe humans are here to remind everyone else what they have forgotten. To bring back the simple things that make life worth living." Wojin raised his cup. "To cardboard boxes." Yuna raised hers. "To cardboard boxes." They drank across the room. Rivi had climbed onto the head table and was announcing her plans for future ambushes. Her target list had grown considerably. Every officer on the ship was now fair game. And in the corner, sitting by himself, Fleet Commander Dorvax watched the cubs play. His face was calm. His eyes were warm. One paw rested in his pocket, holding a torn piece of cardboard like a precious treasure. For the first time in 15 years, he looked at Peace, and it had all started with a box.